There's a hush of expectation, but you're all very, very welcome to this hall. This is Team's Members Day. TEAM is an acronym. It stands for the European Atlantic Movement, and it was founded over 60 years ago when movements were tentative to a united Europe then, the coal and iron community, steel community between Germany and France. And the whole point of the Union was to make sure that our economies were so interlocked that there would be no more war, and that seems to be forgotten. The team was founded then, it's non-political, and has been going since, and organises conferences for sixth forms, and we have a number of schools here today. We have Gunley House Convent School in Isleworth. We have St James's Catholic High School, representatives from Dominic's Sixth Form College, the Ursuline High School, St Albans High School for Girls, and Bromley High School for Girls. So I don't think I've missed any of them out. And we've done conferences at all those schools at some time in the past, and others planned for the future. It's my pleasure to, by the way, I'm a temporary chairman today. Our actual chairman is Lawrence Smythe, but Lawrence had to go into hospital yesterday for a major operation, which I heard from his wife today was a great success. So we wish him well, and he won't be with us for this at all, but hopefully we'll see him in the not too distant future. Our first speaker today is Jayne Forbes. Jayne was a senior lecturer at the University of the Arts. She was chair of the Green Party for 2 years, a candidate for the Green Party at local, London Assembly, parliamentary and European elections, and is now a spokesperson for Extinction Rebellion. All three talks may seem disparate, quite different, but there is a theme, and the theme is justice. Justice, climate justice, justice for the Chagos Islanders, justice in the body politic. So look for it and listen for that theme. And if there is another theme, it's stewardship. Stewardship of the Chagos Islands, stewardship of our planet, our Earth, which Jayne will talk about shortly, and stewardship in the body politic. But those are the themes. They connect all three talks and all three speakers. So without any further ado, I welcome Jayne to speak. Thank you, Jayne.
Good morning all, and welcome. Thank you for attending this. Great to see so many of you. And I really want to thank Team Global for giving me this opportunity to share some of what we do at Extinction Rebellion, to share how important it all is, particularly for you young people. It's absolutely vital. And I just thought I'd start off actually from our new book, This Is Not a Drill. Please buy it. It just tells you more. Share with you the foreword by a lady called Vandana Shiva, who was very well-known environmental activist in India, and she's been doing this for 40 years. And so what she's saying is, we are living through the 6th mass extinction, driven by the limitless greed of the 1%, their blindness to the ecological limits the Earth sets, and the limits set by social justice and human rights. We forget that we are one humanity on one planet. There is no planet B. This is where we live, or go extinct as a species, with the millions that have been driven to extinction by the violence and carelessness of the brute force misleadingly called the economy. Economy, like ecology, is derived from oikos, our home, the earth. An economy that destroys our home is no longer an economy. It's a war against the planet, the people, and our future. So this is it, basically. Extinction Rebellion rose up, if you like, because lots of us have been trying all sorts of other ways to get change in the system for people to understand that the climate and ecological disaster is coming. And now it's here. I've been working on it for 35 years in the Green Party, campaigning. None of it's worked. So finally, when I see an organisation like this that's calling for a model that works historically, talking about civil disobedience, mass civil disobedience, where lots and lots of people go out on the streets and do things they shouldn't be doing, illegal stuff, but with love, with respect, with dignity, I thought, yes, that's got to do it. It's the only answer left. Tried everything else. And it's worked successfully. It's been fantastic. So I just want to remind some of you maybe, or some of you might not have heard some of the detail about the issues that we're facing. Some of you probably know about the IPCC report that came out last autumn, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And they were recommending that to stay within safe limits, we should not go any more than 1.5 degrees C increase in temperature from industrial levels. And right now, that's looking very difficult. Right now, 1.5 degrees C is pretty much built in. And we can see the impacts of that already. You might have heard the news, heat wave in northern France. They reckon it might be 48 degrees. I don't know if anyone knows. I tried 40 degrees once, it wasn't nice. You can't work in it, you can't do anything in it. And that's what's happening. It's gone up to 40 yesterday. This is terrible. We know all about the coral reefs. And I'm sure some of you know a bit about the ice melting. So this is the kind of thing that we can see happening now. And I'll just go into that in a little bit more detail in a moment. So global temperature has steadily increased from 1/4 degree C above the pre-industrial era in the 1990s to an increase of 1.1 degrees C in 2018. There is only a 1% chance of hitting that 1.5 degrees C target. Only a 5% chance it will be less than 2 degrees. And we know what's happening already. It's likely to be something around 3.2 degrees. Nobody knows reality. It depends what we do about it. And what's happening is that our carbon dioxide concentrations are increasing. They have gone up for something like 280 parts per million to 412, which is above the safe limit. It's actually about 415 today. And that's not good, because it's that carbon dioxide that's holding in the heat, creating our global warming, greenhouse gases, etc. We've had a decline in the Arctic Sea ice. So all the ice is melting. You possibly saw pictures last week of Greenland, where the dog sledge was sledging over a lake, water. We know that the Arctic is melting far quicker than was expected. The sea in the north of the Arctic, it's all opening up, so you can get a passage from Russia through to North America, which was always the holy grail back in the days of when shipping was so important. That's happening every summer now. The Antarctic. Scientists were not worried about the Antarctic. They thought that would be okay. No. The western ice shelf on the Antarctic is starting to break up. And the difficulty with the ice, and this is just one example of what happens. So we have what's called the Albedo Effect. The sun comes down, hits the ice, and the ice is there, it reflects the sun back out again. So it's not warming us up anymore. But as the ice is starting to melt, because we've got that warmth trapped into our environment, the ice is starting to melt. So there's less white reflective ice for the sun to go out on. There's actually more dark ocean to absorb that heat. And as the ocean is absorbing the heat, so the waters get warmer around the ice, and so more ice melts. That feedback loop has started. Less ice, less reflection out, more warm water, less ice. And what we're finding as a result of that is weather changes. So those of you who've done geography will know a little bit about air movements and how cold air and hot air, where you get the cold air, it drops down and the hot air comes, and it creates cycles in our temperature and our weather patterns. That is all going to change. we might well lose our warm Gulf Stream that keeps us hotter than we normally are. Nobody knows what's going to happen because we don't know all the interrelationships between all the different things that are happening. So the phytoplankton in the oceans are growing. So they're creating more oxygen, maybe that's good, but they're growing, more algal blooms, that's bad. They actually, as it turns out, more phytoplankton heats up the oceans. Who'd have known? That's having an effect. So there's all these interrelationships, all these knock-on effects. And this is what's happening now. And so we had that IPCC report telling us about 1.5 degrees. The trouble with it was that they're scientists, and those scientists are giving that report to politicians. Scientists, of course, don't talk in 100%. You know, they can never be 100% certain. You just don't know exactly. You've got all your evidence. The scientists now are probably 99.9% agreed. There is so much evidence out there that this is a man-made disaster. It's happening. No one's disagreeing about that now. But what they don't know is what's going to happen. So the scientists do not include uncertainties. So they don't know these feedback loops. They don't know the interrelationships. They don't know what's going to happen. They haven't included it in their output, in their report. And they always look at the least worst because they don't want to overestimate, so they underestimate there. And so again, we know that what they've been saying at 1.5 degrees C is probably very much an underestimate of the issue. That actually 1.5 is there, built in, and it's going to get to 2 degrees. The way we're heading now, absolutely. We're certainly going to get to 2 degrees. Whether it goes beyond that, well, that's a question for what we do about it. And as we know, up to now, we haven't actually done very much about it. So, Extinction Rebellion then saw all this information and understood that this has real impacts on our future. So the impacts we know about are that we're having problems with growing food. The food, particularly in India, for example, right now is happening. The farmers can't work in 40 to 48 degrees, and that's what's happening in India. Can you imagine trying to dig out hard earth at that temperature? And then that the food won't grow in that temperature. It's just too hot. All the research about that shows that the higher the temperature, when it gets to those kinds of levels, the less productive that actual crop is, so the less comes out. As a result of the ice melting, the ice is melting the glaciers in the Himalayas. We heard that this week. The Himalayas, we saw some photographs that came out during the war and compared them with the glaciers now, and they've reduced in size. Now those big glaciers in the Himalayas are feeding the big rivers in India in particular, and some of them in China. So the Ganges, the big one, the Indus, they are going to get less water. And once those glaciers have disappeared, which will happen 50 years, 70, 100, we don't know, it depends on global warming, there will be no water. And in India, it's dry enough as it is. They can't live without water. We can't live without water. It's a real disaster for them. So food is going to be one of the main problems. Then we've got the issue of the ecological issue altogether, if you like. The fact that a lot of our animal populations are dying out. We heard about a report from Germany talking about 40% insect decline from 1970 to the present day. 40%. Just this week there was a report, 30% of the bee colonies in the US have died. Now in the US, they use the farm bee colony people, businesses, to take their bees around to all the different farmers so that they can pollinate their crops with these bees. So actually it's a physical thing, they do this. But if those bee colonies have died, then how are they going to pollinate their crops? So quite apart from the importance of having that ecological variety, that diversity of animal and insect population, you know, and one could argue about the justice of us annihilating all these species, quite apart from that, it's going to have an impact on our food production again, because they're not going to be pollinated. And this is the worry we've had in Europe when they start spraying our crops with poisons. Historically it was DDT, more recently glyphosate. And those kinds of things mean that it's going to have an impact on the insect populations. We have no insects, we have no birds. Birds are also pollinators, some types of birds. So all these different things. We don't have wind, which given the climate change, because we won't have changing weather patterns, pollination by wind is going to change. This is the future. So yes, in Britain, we don't really notice it that much. A bit warm now. Certainly when we have first school strike, I don't know if any of you came to that, the first school strike in February, the big one, it was a gorgeous hot day. What's that about in the middle of February? And then at Easter we had our International Rebellion. Fantastic for us, camping out in the streets. But actually, it shouldn't be that hot for that long. So though we're not seeing directly some of these impacts, as Vandana Shiva is talking about, this is our planet, this is our home. This is something we need to protect for everybody, not just for us here. I got involved with this because I work with women in Africa growing food, very basic, very, very poor women. They don't know when to plant their seeds now. When is the rain going to come? They don't know. So they plant their seeds the normal kind of rain time. The rain doesn't come. Little seedlings are grown, then they die. These are really poor women. They've got no money to buy more seeds. So they have to borrow money, they get into debt. Will these seeds grow when the rain's coming? We don't know. It's really, really hard, and they're suffering this now. So what does that mean for us in our future? What's going to happen to that? Maybe we'll be okay. Sea levels will rise a bit, maybe in 50 years. A few feet, maybe. If you're living in the centre of London, maybe a bit of a problem for you. But where are we going to get our food from? We import 50% of our food. Well, if other people are still able to grow enough food to feed themselves, that's what they'll be doing. They're really not going to be sending us their spare food because they're not going to have any. It's not there. And then what happens if we don't have food? Well, we've seen this very clearly in Venezuela. Okay, there's an issue going on there, not related particularly to climate change, but nevertheless, they've had food shortages, and very quickly that descends into civil unrest, social unrest. Very quickly that can start to get violent. We have seen how climate change has actually contributed to violence and civil unrest already. Many disputes are around lack of access to water and lack of rain. We know that in 2006 to 2011, in Syria, there was a drought. That caused many people to leave the land because they couldn't grow enough crops, to have a viable life. And so they moved to the towns. Lots of people moved to the towns. And you have lots of people moving into an area where they really, can't take it. What are they going to do? What jobs are they going to have? Where are they going to live? It creates conflict, social problems. And that's one of the contextual background factors for the civil problems, the civil war in Syria, that's not usually mentioned. And this happens everywhere. So, we've got these problems that have been ongoing. There are some people who would argue that we've got a government. The government has been a bit lax, shall we say, in doing something about these problems. Yes, our government has introduced the Climate Change Act in 2008. And so they have a Climate Change Committee that reports, as it did this April. But every time the Climate Change Committee reports back to the government ignores what they say. And the Climate Change Committee is trying hard, they're trying to do their best. Again, they don't put up big numbers, they don't make it sound as bad as it probably is. But even that is ignored. We've tried the law. We've tried taking to court about the fact that they're not meeting their climate change commitments. Judge didn't go with it. People have tried ourselves, we do our own individual little bit about it maybe we walk and cycle a bit more, maybe we make sure we have our temperature turned down at home, we don't waste our water, we're thinking about plastic now. But is that enough? No. It has to come from government. The government have got to show this is an emergency. And so Extinction Rebellion have got 3 demands. Our first demand is that the media and government tell the truth about the climate and ecological emergency. Because if they don't tell the truth about it, who's going to believe it's happening? How would you know? And the government has got to do something about it. Our second demand, the government must act now. And the kind of things they're going to have to do might be the sort of things that some people aren't going to like. Well, we can see problems now when the mayor brings in things like the low emission zone. Some people don't like that. When we're all expected to get more on buses and on tubes, and maybe we don't want to do that. Maybe we'd rather go in our car. Just little things we don't want to do. But if we thought it was an emergency, if we thought that you were going to be truly affected by this in 10, 20 years' time, as you are, we should be doing something about it. We shouldn't just be sitting there and faffing over Brexit. They should be getting on and doing stuff in relation to an emergency, because it is an emergency. And our third ask of is that we want the government to set up citizens' assemblies. The government has shown they cannot do it. It's a broken system. They can't even decide what they're doing about Brexit. Parliament can't decide, government can't decide, no one can decide. And Brexit's just a detail in the scheme of things, really, in comparison with this. How are they going to decide about this? So we need people who are engaged, people who know, people who have lots of information about it to come together and discuss issues together and what we should do about it. And that would be the Citizen Assembly. And we've got all sorts of stuff about how that works. You can ask about later if you want. So those are the three asks that we've got of the government. Now, because the government has not been doing much, the government's primary role is security of its people, the state, of the country. That's its primary function. Without that, what's the point? And yet they have not been doing it. They have not been protecting our security in the future, your security. I'm not going to be around. They're not doing it for me. It's you young people that are affected mostly by this, that's really going to be hurt by it. And you're the ones that have got to tell the government, this has got to change. So, if we believe the government is not doing a job, what right has the government got to do anything at all? We believe we have a greater right, therefore, to protest on the streets through civil disobedience. Because we have to tell the government this is right. We have to hit them through the economy, which we've done by swarming on the streets in London, by closing down bridges in London. And that's the main way we're going to do it. And we have to keep pushing and pushing. So, the UK government has declared a climate emergency. Fantastic. Really, really pleased. However, they're thinking that net zero carbon emissions by 2050 that's it, that's fine, that'll solve the problem. Well, in 2050, this planet will be devastated. Most people will not be around. Only the rich will survive this. The rich will find a place to go, will find a way to look after himself. The rest of us, forget it. 2050 is too late. We know that if they have a target of 2050, they might start thinking about doing something in 2040. No, they have to do it now. It's an emergency now. Because if they leave it too long, well, first of all, of course, it's a disaster. Second, the cost will be far greater. The cost is a lot less if they do it now. So we can change it. And that's what we're here to do as Extinction Rebellion. We get people out on the streets. We have had thousands of people out on the streets. So many people understand this is the only thing to do now. Lots and lots of young people on their school strikes, once a month on a Friday. Lots of young people joining Extinction Rebellion as well. We have a youth group. And if anybody's interested, see me afterwards. I've got a form you can join with. So really, really important. The more people we get out, we know that if we get 3.5% of the population supporting this, change will happen. All the research, the evidence is out there that shows you only need a small percentage of the population to make that change. And that's what has to happen now. We have to do that. We have to get out on the streets. So Some of you might have engaged with the rebellion in April. I hope so. I was at Marble Arch. I was at Oxford Circus. And I'm also involved with the press team, so it means that I can hear everything that's going on, which is really quite interesting as well. But our youth group have been doing things. A few weeks ago, they locked themselves on to the fence at the House of Commons, at Parliament, wanting Parliament to listen to that voice. That's so important. We are gearing up now for much more action, so that we're going to be doing more actions on the streets. People talk about Heathrow shutting it down. Still discussing that one. You might have heard about it. But basically what we're trying to do right now is to mobilise people, to get people involved, to get people learning what needs to be done. And so some of the things that can be done, for example, is Extinction Rebellion have a talk, a proper talk, an hour and a half talk with good slides that it's really useful to attend. We do lots of different kinds of training for people. So we train people to, if they want to be arrested, not many of course want to be arrested, but I have to say, I managed to get myself arrested and it wasn't that bad. Actually, it was quite nice, I have to say, but I got a break, I got to sleep on a nice police cell. But most people can't do that. I can do that, I'm retired. I don't have to worry about my future and my CV. I know you young people, obviously it's far more difficult, there's lots of other things. I've seen so many young people out there, certainly on the school strike, sitting on the streets, blocking the streets. They're not getting arrested. They're telling the police, no, we're staying here. And it's great. And the young people, or everybody, can get engaged with other elements of it. So we have other things like well-being, regeneration. It's really, really important. We have this vision of the way things should be. We want a just society. We want equality. Not this broken system that we've got now with, I can't remember the figures, 10% of the people earning or owning 90% of the wealth, whatever it is, I forget now. But very few people own the wealth. That has got to change. Because we know that with that inequality comes climate inequality. So the poorest people are the ones that are suffering. The poorest people who contributed the very least to this issue are the ones that are suffering. And they're the ones that are actually going to suffer even more. While we, the rich world, are doing very well, thank you very much. Most of us may or may not get through it all, somehow, I don't know. The rich will, definitely. What kind of world is that going to be? So in terms of justice, this has got to be addressed. In terms of justice for the planet itself, it has to be addressed. So finally, what can you guys do? Well, as young people, as I've said, you can join Extinction Rebellion. You can join Extinction Rebellion youth group. As I say, very active, very keen. Small things maybe you could do with your own lives if you've not thought about it. I know it's becoming very popular. I haven't quite got there myself. There's lots of people are going vegan. Vegetarian, yes. So, yeah, meat. Stop eating meat. Beef in particular. One of the big contributors to climate change. Anything that involves fossil fuel, a big contributor to climate change. One thing that's started out fairly recently that you may or may not wish to join in is a fashion boycott. Fashion clothes contribute enormous emissions. Growing cotton or their fossil-based fuels. Either way, they're really bad for the environment. We shouldn't be doing it. The actual production itself uses lots of water, lots of chemicals. Water is a scarce resource. Should we really be wasting it on more clothes that we really need them? Distribution, the cost of transporting them. Probably a lot of them are coming from China. People ask us, yeah, it's all very well talking to our UK government, but what about all the Chinese emissions? Well, the Chinese emissions are ours. We're buying the stuff. Really, they should be counted as ours, but of course they're not counted as ours. We're a powerful country, we can decide how things are counted, and no, we're not counting that as our emissions, they're their emissions. But we're buying the stuff, so it should be our emissions. So you've transported them, you've sold them, all of that stuff. Very expensive environmentally. Especially if you go to Primark, throw away clothes, £5, £10, wear it once, twice, 3 times, chuck it. Landfill is full of clothes. Should we be doing this? And I have to say, a lot of the fashion clothes buying is young people. You know, they see everybody in the new fashion, everyone's got to have it, social media, I've got. But actually, you're doing your future no good. Buy better clothes maybe that will last. Don't follow the sheep, be like a sheep, following everybody else, do your own thing. Recycle your clothes, change them, go to charity shops. That's become a big thing now. So this is the sort of thing that you can do personally. Because this is your future I'm talking about. And it's really, really important to engage this topic. Thank you.
Listening to Jayne speak reminded me that we've had 2 conferences recently. I think they were both at Gumley House. One on climate change, where we had scientists, etc., echoing what you said about rising sea levels, and that one particular nation, the Maldives, are going to disappear if the oceans rise any further, because they're going to just cover the islands, and obviously a big concern to them. And also we had a conference on the truth behind the label, as you were saying. Cheap garments, fashion garments made overseas, coming here, and that we're buying them, and that we have a choice not to do that. Are there any questions for Jayne?
As there is going to be a lack of water, why do we not hear more about desalination of seawater? Is it just that it's too expensive or impractical? What is
From
the
my
reason?
understanding, that's the case. Yes, it's a very expensive way of getting clean water.
It seems odd with all our technology that scientists can't work on that and get the price down.
Yes, I think it takes quite big plants, and so you need a certain critical mass of water that you need. I mean, in London, sure it's quite feasible. However, we get lots of rain, so we're not going to do it. I think Israel does it because they don't get much rain and they have the money to do it. But for most countries who don't have the money, who are poor, they don't have the wherewithal to build them. And another problem that we're facing here with these ideas of some of the technological fixes, a bit like that, is that a lot of things we want to do involve concrete, creating more things with concrete buildings. I mean, like Heathrow, obviously we do not want Heathrow runway 3, of course, but the runway will create the need for masses more concrete. Concrete is something like the 3rd biggest climate problem. It's a really big issue, and China, let's be fair, they have been pouring masses and masses of concrete, and it's a real issue, concrete, that no one ever really thinks about. We think about flying and stuff, but actually, concrete's a real problem. And so, the trouble is, most of our resources are a real problem. I could say, well, let's use wood instead, but then we've got to cut down trees, and yes, we want to grow more trees, of course, we want to reforest. And this is why we need government, because it needs government commitment to do all of these things, reforestation. But, if we're going to use trees then and cut them down, we haven't got time, basically. We can't grow the forest quick enough to cut down for wood. So a lot of the potential solutions are not brilliant. Electric cars. Well, they're going to create a lot of extra resource use, embodied energy in the building of the car. It's greater embodied energy in building an electric car than in an ordinary car. And historically, I don't know now, no one's been able to give me this information, that the amount of energy you use in the car over the lifetime you use it is about equivalent to the energy in creating the car, that embodied energy. So there's a lot. So it's all very well saying, let's all have electric cars, but no, that's bad because of all the energy use you need, and resource use, scarce resources, all the electronical stuff, the microchips, the scarce minerals that they need in batteries, etc., that they're often in conflict countries, these resources, or cobalt, or wherever, in China and places that are difficult to access and there's not much of it. We can't all have that solution. It's tough. Sorry, I died.
Are there any other questions, Mike? Maybe repeat the question.
is it not a fact that rice is a major source of methane emissions? Because rice is grown basically under marsh conditions. Paddy rice is, you're creating a marsh, and methane, of course, is known as marsh gas. The problem is, of course, that about a third to half the world's population is dependent on rice as its staple crop. What happens there?
Yeah, no, I didn't know that. That's really interesting. That's something else I'm going to have to research, isn't it? That's a scary thought, isn't it? Very scary, as more countries have moved over to rice. My suspicion is the less water there's going to be, the less rice they're going to be growing. Anyway, by default, it's going to happen that there'll be less rice. So they will have to go, Africa, for example, just have to go back to its older crops, sorghum and yam.
We're talking about India and China.
Exactly, but they could probably do the same. They'd have to change their diet to the old solid crops of sorghum and yam.
Very easily said.
But you see, what we're asking for is a war mentality. This is an emergency. It's not something that we've got 15 or 20 years to solve. Yeah? We need to solve it. It's an emergency. As Greta Thunberg says, if your house is on fire, you don't stand there wondering what colour to paint the walls or whether you've taken your insurance out. You get out of the house. And that's the situation we're in now. And yes, we could wait for a year or so and start doing it then. It's just going to get tougher and tougher. And so people are going to have to change and adapt quite quickly. And so one can imagine, for example, a government like China would quite relatively easily be able to try and institute a change in diet. They can do it much more easily than we can. They're doing much more about climate change now than we are. Given the kind of political system they've got, they can just introduce it, and it doesn't matter what people think. And that's what they're doing. There's a lot of stuff they're actually doing. And so in terms of the food, that's something else that they could do, isn't it? Just try and develop that area.
Can I ask you, are you saying that basically an authoritarian government is much better placed than governments that depend on the democratic process to effect all of these changes? I mean, that seems to me the big problem, that we in the West are devoted to our democratic process, and we're going to be voting for particular political parties, and our wishes may be to have them legislate various processes by which we stop being meat eaters.
Again,
we're going to have to persuade an awful lot of people in the country, and we had a recent referendum on a different issue which we won't go into, but an awful lot of people were against a certain business, and the country was very divided. The only way that you can effect the changes that you're talking about is by an authoritarian process and ignoring, if you like, the will of the people.
And that's exactly why our three demands are what they are. So the first demand is the government and the media tell the truth. Because without the public knowing and understanding the situation, truth is the scientific evidence.
Yeah.
That's what they need to know. If I could have shown you the graphs now from the scientists, it's shocking. Really shocking. Can I just explain the rest of it?
Let her answer, Mike.
Can I explain the rest of it? So, if population doesn't know, they're not going to come with it, right? Secondly is they have to act. Third, citizens' assembly. Now what we could have, and we're wanting to go like a war footing. Now in a war, well, you have a propaganda machine. Okay, call it what you will. But you have a media and a government that are all on the same page and are all churning out stuff to say, this is what we have to do, this is important. And the public gets behind you. They did. They changed very quickly from being, no, it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. Yes, it's going to happen. Oh God, we're in a war. So this is what we're going to do. Everybody got into it very quickly. It can be done. And then you need a consensus government. So you need a government that all agree, this has got to be tackled. There's no time for politicking and argument. This has got to happen. And so that's what you have to have. And then we want the citizens' assembly which will involve everybody, well, the representatives of the population, in coming to ideas and solutions, and that they recommend to the consensus government to move forward. So we don't have to lose it, we don't have to have an authoritarian government as such, but in this particular case, it needs a strong government who can take action, not a divided parliament. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes, Tim.
A couple of things. First of all, I'm sorry I'm late. I enjoyed very much what I did here when I came. And I have been to the Maldives, and many years ago, I'm ashamed to say I shouldn't have gone, but I did go. And you're absolutely right what you're suggesting. I mean, their front gardens on the islands are subjected to the tide twice a day coming in. I mean, their front gardens are already being flooded. That was 20 years ago I went there. And the other thing I wanted to say to you is I've got a suggestion. Do you think it might be an idea if somebody worked on looking again at that film, The Inconvenient Truth, that Gore produced, and updating it, and then showing it to every single secondary and primary school in the country, which is what I had at my school. We had the original. But I think things have probably deteriorated since he made that film. Do you think that might be an idea?
Possibly, but I suspect the David Attenborough one would be better.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, in our book we've got a chapter written by Mohammed Nasheed, who was the president of the Maldives between 2008 and 2012, saying exactly what's happening there. And he has taken, he's Extinction Rebellion, and he wears the badge, talks our language, of course, because he's having to, his country's suffering it.
True.
Yeah.
You just see it with your own eyes.
Right, yeah. And so it's happening now, and it's just that we don't see it here in this country, and yet we are responsible, to a great extent, some people would argue, for a lot of the emissions that are causing the problems in the first place.
Is there just one final question? Yes.
This has all been a political discussion, but the issue is technological. Do you have specific proposals that, if enacted, would result in reduced carbon dioxide emissions?
No, we don't do proposals. It's far too tricky an area. We're fundamental about tackling the issue that it has to be raised and it has to be dealt with. That's what we're here to do. We're not here to answer the questions. We're not scientists, we're not technologists. Yes, there are lots of technologies, CCT, there's all sorts of things that we could do. And we are not getting into that debate, that discussion. That's not our expertise. For us, we want the discussion to happen. And we want the scientists and the experts to come together to come up with the best solutions, to provide that information to the citizen assemblies so that they can discuss all of these and see, right, what's acceptable to us as representatives of our population who know that we've got to deal with this now. And so it's not up to us to say that. So we don't have any proposals. I mean, there are certain things that we will campaign about just because they're a good target. So like Heathrow Runway 3, fracking, oil companies, anything fossil fuel related. They're just an example of the problem. And that's why we tackle those particular types of organisations, and we will do other organisations if we see that they're an example that's worth us trying to tackle. But at the end of the day, we want to cause civil disruption to enable our government to do something about it.
Right, I'd just like to remind us that in the news last week, we saw news from Lapland, where the culture and the life of the Sami people is threatened by climate change. They depend on the reindeer, and things are deteriorating at such a pace there that their whole way of life will disappear simply because of climate change and the warming in Lapland, in Finland, and where it overlaps into the other Nordic countries. So your message to us, I think, Jayne, is education and the truth, and the time is to act now. So a huge thank you for coming.
Get on the streets.
And get on the streets. Right, thank you, Jayne.